to this fantastical reading of my book. I also am buffering a little bit here because when you hit go live, there's still about a 25-second delay between when it actually goes live after you've hit the button. But you might notice that I'm not wearing my headphones tonight as usual because I'm not so concerned with hearing what's going on, although the crackle of the fire soothing, to say the least. I've really been enjoying it, and I'm really sad to lose it. It was nice to have, but I figured that the headphones were probably just a little bit much tonight. He says as he's wearing a ridiculous, like, suit and scarf concoction. I'm basically dressed like the wizard from my introductions right now. And, you know, that's just kind of how we roll. I don't know if the live on YouTube is fully caught up or not, or if it jumped the gun and gave you a little bit too much. But hopefully we're off to a decently good start. Now that we're officially up and running, I'm assuming at this point, let me tell you what's going on. There's a lot of really interesting things happening today. The whole goal of doing this, obviously, was to try and promote my book, encourage you to grab a copy if you've been on the fence and you haven't grabbed one already. For those of you that have a copy, give you the pleasure of hearing it in my voice, of course. And then, yeah, that's the main point, obviously. But with something else that's going on that was inspired this morning, I made and launched a video right away, and we've already hit our goal, is supporting coffee shops here in Paris. Some of my favorite coffee shops. I've been trying to figure out a way of supporting small businesses as we go. Hopefully you guys can hear me, by the way. If you guys are having any, I'll check the chat here in a minute. If there are any audio issues, like the fire is too loud or you don't hear me or anything like that, I'll be sure to check. So it sounds like everything's good, though, from what I'm seeing over here. I've been trying to think of ways to support small businesses that I love in the community for a while, and I really wasn't sure what to do. I made a video about it today. And so I'd like to take just a moment to encourage you, if you haven't seen that video yet, or you want to find the link below in the description, it's below the bigger chunk. I put a little update in there. You want to buy a virtual coffee? We'll do another live stream where we can drink coffee together and just kind of chat. It'll be a little bit more informal than tonight. As you can see, tonight's very formal. But we're going to definitely do a little bit of a chitter chat along the way, and enjoy some virtual coffee. So if you want to buy me a coffee, we've already hit my goal, which is really quick. So I'm going to match that initial goal of coffees. But if you still want to throw more in on top, I'm hoping now that we like double the goal, because then basically we'll buy 100 coffees from each of the 3 different coffee shops in question, which is really exciting. I'm really, really happy about that. So really looking forward to doing that. Also, I forgot, it's 8 o'clock, so you can hear people cheering outside. At first I thought there was a kid just screaming like he was like throwing bowling balls at people passing by, which hopefully is not what's happening. But it's 8 o'clock, so people are, clapping outside. So anyways, if you want to help support some of those fantastic coffee shops, maybe you've been there before, maybe you're dreaming of going there, I want to make sure that they stay open, and that was a way of trying to figure out. I'm just trying to help in some way, shape, or form. So hopefully it does some good. That's the plan. So anyways, at the end of it, here's 2 things we're going to do, since this is a live stream. I'm going to read the first chapter. My patrons voted on which chapter I would read. I'm going to read the first chapter, including the intro. There's a little intro piece, and I'll read that first chapter. If, by the time I get to the end of that first chapter, I've sold 10 more books. I've written down the numbers for how many books we have sold so far. If I've sold 10 more books within that first chapter, then I'll read you a bonus chapter. I'll give you one more chapter in this live stream by the fire. Should be nice. Sounds like everything's good on the audio. Good. Okay, perfect. We've got some fire emojis going and everything. Fantastic. So yeah, if we sell 10 more copies, then I'll read a second chapter. I figured that's a fun little motivator, hopefully. Fun. I feel so preposterous right now. I feel like I should be talking like this. And then at the very end, if you want to go grab a coffee, I'm going to go through and I'm going to finish this video by saying thank you to everybody who's bought a coffee just by name. Just going to say thank you. So I'm going to open up coffee on my other screen here and scroll through and say thank you to everybody. Because I've been trying to thank everybody by text, like respond to every purchase that's come through, every donation. But we'll go back and just thank everybody by name as we go. So in the meantime, I'm going to put the pipe away. I do have a beer over here. I'm drinking the Deck and Donahue. Speaking of local businesses, this is a local Parisian brewery. I'm kind of in love with their IPA right now. I got a few different beers from them. I wasn't as big of a fan of the other 2 that I got from these guys. They're okay. They're fine. But I don't know what it is about this beer, but I'm kind of in love with it. It gives me, this is going to sound weird, and we're going to read potentially the second chapter that I might or might not be reading tonight. Details a few of my failed attempts at finding love. And for whatever reason, this beer makes me think of love. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. There's just a flavor to it that just Makes me wish I wasn't in quarantine, all alone. Huh. Anyways, I'm going to get to the reading now. I'm just going to look over here, make sure we don't have any technical problems. Everybody's chilling out, having a grand old time. Fantastic. The pipe. This is my grandpa's pipe, by the way. He promised me that I could have one of his biggest Sherlockian, Holmesian pipes. This has got the wizard gnarl going. So, without further ado, let's get to the reading from Sea of the Unknown. You can see the down in the corner, other corner, I guess, you can see the book cover, and then there's a link to buy a copy. If you haven't bought one already, just make sure you open it in another tab. I'm not even smoking it. I'm coughing off this thing. That's how potent it is. Yeah, grab a copy of the book. I just put it in its little case. And but leave this tab open so you can hear me reading as you buy a copy of the book. And away we go. I'll be reading it off this other screen. I'm going to keep it as close to the camera as possible. So don't be too weirded out by me looking over here. And thanks, Andrew. I see that. Thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate it. I'm going to try to keep an eye on the super chat a little bit, but I'm also going to try and give you a real reading experience here. I've got a little bit of practice because I've been reading. I'm up to chapter 10 for the unofficial audiobook for my friend Natasha, so she can listen to it while she's unfortunately ill a lot of the time. So I've got one practice run in this, but this is going to be like, I'm sure there'll be mistakes, and I'm probably going to stumble across a few typos that I didn't notice on the first go, and I'm going to try not to let them distract me. And we're just going to roll with it. We're just going to have a good time. It's just you and me right now. Just us. It's just us sitting here by the fire. Look at us. Just look at us. Isn't this nice? That's so nice. All right. Here we go. Setting out to sea. You stand on the, or you know what, before I say that, I got started, but the fan on the computer, I don't know if you can hear it, but it's driving me crazy, so I'm going to prop this up and hope to give it a little more air, and maybe it'll calm down here in a second. Adjust the camera angles and so forth here. Voila. Okay. Now, back to it. Setting out to sea. You stand on the shores of the known. Behind you rises the dust of a well-traveled continent, the main trail rolling on behind you before winding and branching off into the hills and plains beyond. There's a breeze rolling off the land at your back, warm and dry. The maps available for this continent are decent. The more desirable destinations are well marked, and their routes notched with clear landmarks. They aren't free of risk or challenge, but the biggest of the dragons here have all been slain. The ancient places staked out, sterilized, and incorporated into the new. From what you can tell, none of them have what you're really looking for. Before you, lapping at your feet and crashing against nearby piers, lies the Sea of the Unknown. It's slate gray, cold. While the waves aren't so big near the beach, there's a lot of chop in the distance. Far beyond the churn and spray loom the stable specters of your desire. A solitary mountain caught in the sea haze, a lower ridge some miles to its south. Are they separate islands? Perhaps they're connected by a land bridge you can't see from here. And twinkling just over the horizon, like some forgotten star on the verge of vanishing into itself, stands what must be a massive lighthouse, monstrous enough to cut through the haze and keep its head above the curvature of the earth. Above the chaos and through untold distance, that light calls to you. It's not articulated in the air, but it resonates in your heart as clearly as if you could hear it singing. You've heard the legends. You know others have made it out there, so you know it's possible. Though whether they carved their own path or won life's lottery and hitched a ride on someone else's yacht, the water leaves no trails, and no retroactive map can get you there. There's little sense in standing on this beach, staring at the chaos of the sea with the comforts of known territory well within reach behind you. But the calling never leaves you, not once it's made its mark. Even if there's no way of knowing how you'll get there, or what will stand in your way, you can't let it affect you, or you'll never even try. You wander the trail, saving what you can to build your first attempt at a raft. The panels are cracked and the rope is frayed, but you lash one together and push off into the water. It doesn't take long to realize you'll need more than a paddle. As the ropes dissolve and you fall into the sea, you're simultaneously ashamed and relieved to see how close to shore you still are. You pick yourself up, your raft a loss, and march back to the trail to prepare your next effort. This time, you pick up some work that's even less aligned with your future. The people with whom you talk or walk the trail scoff at your designs for a sail made from sheets, your idea to use a sink as your anchor. But deep down, you know it will work this time. You pull together a larger raft with space for more water and food. You slather it with tar this time, sealing the water out and protecting the thicker rope you managed to buy off of a friend. The farewells are bittersweet, many marred by comments asking if you wouldn't be better off sticking to the trail. It's the lack of belief that cuts you deepest, but if you won't believe in yourself at this point, then you fear no one will. You put your head down and shove your raft out to sea, not bothering to look back for fear of what you'll see in the faces you're putting behind you. This time, your raft cuts through the small waves battering the coast. Your sail picks up a gust, and you feel your heart lighten for the first time in as long as you can remember. The sail pulls you faster than you can paddle, your tiny rudder wobbling, but holding true. You catch a fish, frying it on a small stove you scrounged from an acquaintance, and saving your dry stores for the journey ahead. You don't know if any of the islands along the way will be able to resupply you, and deceptively, they seem to remain stagnant in the distance, even as you gain on them. You tighten your belt, you ration and mind your heading, but the wind starts to rise, and the waves along with it. Clouds roll in, obscuring the sun and your destination at once. You hear the nagging warnings of the voices you left behind on the trail, eating at your confidence as the wind turns to a gale. Perhaps you really were the fool. Invisible rain rakes your face as you pull out your paddle and fight to keep going. You ride high on one wave only to be smashed by the next. Your small mast snaps. The sail tears and flies off into the wind. The rudder no longer wobbles so much as lurches free and skims along the surface. Soon, you're paddling just to keep from spinning out of control. Your water supply is slosh free, and you can feel cracks popping open beneath you, even if you can't hear them over the roar of the wind. By the time the storm abates and the skies clear, you're exhausted, bruised, and sodden. You can't rest long, you tell yourself, and you sit up to take stock of your situation. Your mast is a splintered stub. Your water supplies, lost or mixed with salt water. The distant peaks look even farther away than they did when you set out. Were you an idiot to believe in yourself so fully? You know you can do this. At least, you thought you could. And then you turn, and your heart falters as you realize the storm has blown you back to shore. You still have your paddle, and your raft held together this time. You try to take some consolation in those facts, but you know it's not enough. The voyage at hand has only become more daunting. In spite of what progress you may have made, you're no closer than when you began. You might be worse. What might be worse, you realize, as you drag your shattered vessel back onto land, isn't even starting from scratch, but crawling back onto the trail long enough to get started again, listening to the people around you question your motives, your desires, and what feels like your very identity. You stand on the beach for a long time, holding back the tears that threaten to flow. Breaking now is not an option, nor will it ever be, you tell yourself. You drop the paddle in the sand and rally what little strength you have left. Whether you ever even made it that far from shore or you were just playing sailor, you'll never know. Dwelling on it won't help. So you wring out your clothes and you make your way back onto the trail to try again. That's the opening. And then there's this, for those of you who get a book, there's this picture of the Eiffel Tower as that beacon over the horizon that I drew some time ago. Whoops. Didn't mean to do that. Come back, fire. Ugh. Windows. I was just gesticulating with the Eiffel Tower. I didn't really mean for you to... Windows. Being a jerk. Okay. So that is the intro, and I'll read the first chapter here in a second. Thanks for watching, everybody. I saw there was another... Thank you, Crystal, for the super chat. I really appreciate that. It's really kind of you. And Jamie, I missed you earlier. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate those. Hope you're enjoying it. Thank you very much. Richard's in here, too. Maybe you guys will get a Gustav quote in chat, because he can't share pictures. All right. Chapter 1. Knowing you're meant to go. Attempt number 1. Nice, 2008. I've always wanted to make movies. It's something that's been core to who I am since I made Jason and the Argonauts in the 4th grade. We filmed all over my neighborhood on my buddy's VHS camcorder, and I edited on the fly, sprinting home after every take to check it on my VCR. If it was no good, I'd rewind to the previous cut to reshoot. If it was a keeper, I'd try my best to stop the tape at the right spot to cut to the next scene. It proved to be much better cardio than my workflow as an adult. I didn't own my own camera until after college, but I was fortunate to have a school system that purchased such frivolities and made them available to students. Every project that could be a video was a video. I steadily dropped out of sports in high school and spent more and more time sitting at a computer like the isolated nerd I was destined to become. Storytelling, while naturally a social art form, requires an ungodly amount of alone time to develop before the social parts can happen, unless you want those social parts to be awkward. These dreams would stick with me all the way to film school and beyond, after I quit film school because I realized that I hated film school. My French minor became a French major. I kept making short videos and skits, and then I wound up in France. I've always wanted to live in France. I don't really know why, but there was a magnetic pull from the home of the baguette. My loyalty to the idea came early, formed out of the ether of Madeleine cartoons and posters of the Eiffel Tower in my geography classes. It was embarrassingly strong. In my middle school, Spanish classes were available starting in 7th grade, roughly at age 12. French wasn't available until high school, 2 years later, which I found an utter betrayal of what should have been clear priorities for my education. So, when they rolled out an experimental Spanish introduction during the sacred space of my 6th grade art class, I was livid. Not only were they coming for me a year early, forcing me to recite such useful words as El Toro and Rojo, but they were doing so by violating the holy pact of art class. The one place where I wasn't only allowed to draw, but drawing was the whole point. I specifically made my perspective study, a sketch of King Tut's golden casket, look as perturbed as my 11-year-old skills enabled. He probably looked more constipated than consternated, but that was an honest enough resemblance of how forced Spanish made me feel. Of course, as an adult, I regret not taking the chance to learn both Spanish and French. It took a couple of decades for my ambitions to overcome my pettiness. Regardless of the fact that I only needed 2 years of foreign language to graduate from high school, I immediately dove in and studied French for all 4. Not realizing the power of the accent until this point, or perhaps only developing a susceptibility to it around this time, I fell in love with the woman who narrated Le Petit Prince, and subsequently with the idea of life wherever it was she lived. Unfortunately for our very one-sided romance, I couldn't find my way to France. My parents couldn't afford to ship me off to study abroad either, and when I was in college, I did manage to swing a fluke trip to Europe. I was still firmly stuck in Italy, with no chance to sneak north across the border. So, right after college, I threw caution to the wind and moved to Nice. I chose Nice for a few reasons. One was that it had close ties to my university program, so nearly everyone I knew had done study abroad at some point had done it in the Côte d'Azur. The second was that my church at the time had equally close ties to an organization in the region, and as someone who had never lived abroad before, I found that all of these preordained connections made for an appealing first landing pad. Unfortunately, this was how I found out that I didn't want to live in France. I'd been far too general in projecting my desires. I slowly came to realize that I had made a mistake. And it wasn't just because of how boring I found teaching English in a French technical school. Don't get me wrong, I loved my time in Nice. I attained fluency in the language, I made a swath of new international friends, and I developed a completely different sense of scale for what was walkable. Nice also taught me how to identify an entire spectrum of urine-related scents I'd never known existed, and it presented me with my first encounters with the mafia, after a couple of cars got torched in front of my apartment one night. All in all, I left Nice thinking perhaps I'd gotten my wires crossed. I really wanted to be making movies, didn't I? Why was I wandering France's most uncomfortable beach in winter? Of course, the one benefit to hanging out on the beach at Nice in winter is the distinct lack of tanning lotion smeared across the rocks underfoot. Not reason enough to go, but the silver lining of a gray stone coastline. During this year of solidifying my French and questioning my sense of judgment, I sat down and made my first attempt at writing the prequel to my first trilogy. It was a doomed piece of fiction titled The Rise of the Shadow King, and I discovered firsthand just how hard it is to sit down and hammer out a finished novel of any length, or passing quality. Though the experience would be invaluable as I tackled different stories later on, at the time, I considered it a failure, and I decided I needed some help. It wasn't a pleasant discovery, failing to finish my first book, but I knew I could get back to it. I thought perhaps I should go back to the States and continue my education. I still wanted to live abroad, and I thought that France was still the place to do it. But I was quickly discovering how limited my visa options were. So I applied for a master's program in theology. Wait, what? The knowledgeable reader has just stopped to ask in bewilderment. How on earth is a theology degree going to help you get back into a country that prides itself on its secularism? For starters, I never claimed to be the brightest of children. To defend my nonsensical thought process, in my mind, theology was directly tied to two men who are counted among the founding parents of science fiction and fantasy, C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. They were intellectual giants, professors, and theologians of their own sort. So why wouldn't I want to follow in their footsteps? Not only did I need to start going by Jay Swanson, but it seemed quite possible that without a higher degree in something even more esoteric than a romance language, I was probably doomed from the start. I think it's also easy to discount just how perilously lost one can feel at the end of a prescribed course of actions and life choices. I grew up in a university town. College was king. Something like 96% of my graduating class went to college. The majority right there in Pullman, Washington. Everything was clear up to the point of graduation, and the value of the degree itself was incredibly overinflated. Just get a degree, the jobs will flow, was high among the mantras of my teachers. But once you graduated, things weren't so clear from that point. So why not go back to school and give myself a little more time to figure it out? When you set out to sea a little prematurely, the harbor behind you looks way better than it ever did before. My parents made the trip over as my time teaching English in Nice came to its close. It was exciting to have them there, to share my little life in the south of France as it came to an end. Neither of them had ever been to Europe before, which made our time exploring even more special to all of us. We wandered Nice for a week before heading to Paris, and my life abruptly and irreparably shifted. This was where I was supposed to be. This was the city I had been dreaming of. The textured beige of Parisian limestone carved into winding lanes branching off of Haussmannian boulevards, capped with beautiful blues and blacks that still serve as the only example of uniform urban construction I've ever found appealing. The monuments, street corner cafes, and broad walkable stretches made their lasting impression. This was an inspired city. A city where my imagination ran wild. After exploring Paris for a feverish week, bike tour and all, a resolution took root. I had to make it back. It was May 2008, and the world was full of promise. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was going to live in Paris. And then there's a picture. I'm going to do this without accidentally shrinking the whole thing. Come on. I don't... No! The dual monitor wants to stop me on the edge here, so I'll just swoop it in there a little bit. There you go. There used to be a caption to this that only my sister knows. Actually, Richard might know what the original caption to that whirlpool was, but we'll leave that out for now. All right. Back in the whirlpool. I wasn't sure how to get back to Paris. I also realized that taking on more debt for a master's was looking like a worse decision every day, especially without any real plan of applying it to a career. I'd already done that once, and it wasn't panning out well. So I dropped out and contented myself working at my alma mater until I could figure things out. The idea of international living had burrowed under my skin since I first read Tintin and the Secret of the Unicorn, or insert any of the other dozens of Tintin books I read as a kid. But now it had taken hold in my heart. A burp there, my bad. Fulfillment, I guess I didn't need to tell you that. Cheers. Doing it live. Fulfillment of that desire would have to go on an unfortunate hiatus. I was being groomed to take over my boss's position, running the university's computer labs. It was a job with which, if we're being honest, I was woefully mismatched. But it was safe. If my plans of becoming an international man of mystery were hazy and dangerous, Working in a computer lab with college students sounded like the perfect counterbalance of potential outcomes. In the meantime, while my boss worked up to moving on, I had a pretty sweet gig developing training materials for the staff and upgrading the interior design of the largest lab. To be honest, I was tempted to settle in for a while. Academia was cushy and familiar. It reminded me of home. Fast forward to that moment where the state realized that they were financially boned. To say that the onset of the 2008 recession was cruel to me seems relatively fair in retrospect. It certainly felt like it at the time. There are many who took heavier hits, but I think I land pretty firmly in the I got screwed section at the middle of the bell curve. Not only did my boss decide to stay in his position, as it was looking risky to move out, but my contract was not renewed due to a massive hiring freeze, and I found myself jobless in an economy that suddenly had very little use for me. Doubly so in a community that didn't particularly value aspiring storytellers / nerds of many varieties, even when times were good, let alone when facing the nation's biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression. I suddenly found myself in a very precarious situation, one that would become a very common story across the country. I had a lot of debt and no real job prospects, with a degree that left few clamoring for my resume. I'm not going to advise you to get a French degree, but I certainly won't push you towards it either. Not going to advise you not to get a French degree. You know what I mean. Don't do it. I mean, you do whatever your heart tells you to do. Anyways, back to the book. Over the next 2 years, I would work tirelessly to start freelancing in web and graphic design, dallying in video when the opportunities arose. I struggled. A lot. I dreamed of getting back to Paris. I craved the freedom of being my own boss. This was the period of time where I invested a lot of energy into skits on YouTube, betting that one viral video would surely catapult me to fame and fortune. I spent zero energy on my fiction because the slow grind of publishing a book was mysterious, out of my hands, and seemingly a longer road to making movies, if that really was where I was trying to go. I finally got a job in a marketing company that didn't want to hire me for my video skills, but decided they'd have me on as a web designer. They talked a big game about getting lots of interesting clients on board, shoe brands and car manufacturers, but in reality, they had created a lead generation front for the payday loan company across the street. I felt as gross to discover that as I imagine you did reading it, or hearing it right now on YouTube. If you don't know what a payday loan is, first, consider yourself lucky. Second, it's basically a very high-interest, short-term loan handed out to people in desperate situations and intended to trap them in a cycle of debt they can never escape. It really is that bleak. Despite allowing me to build up a small amount of savings, the red flags were quickly piling up, and I tendered my resignation shortly after my boss got into a fistfight with his brother in the hallway outside my office. They were raided by the IRS and shut down a few months later. The little savings I had built up didn't last long. I had an accident on a jet ski early in the summer, which left me with a massive bruise on my stomach that quickly hardened deep under the skin. This required an MRI, which in the end simply told me that I was fine. The medical costs cleaned me out. The one time I get on a jet ski as an adult. Looking for anything, I took a job for the summer enumerating for the Census Bureau leading up to the 2010 census. To begin with, my territory was the immediate urban area of Spokane, but they eventually moved me north to a broader rural region. I had to drive my 1990 maroon Honda Accord into all kinds of places, and I only received occasional threats of bodily harm from farmers along the way. It wasn't so bad at first, but I was soon being asked to trek to the tapered ends of some very remote logging roads. My brief career as an enumerator ended when I drove into a mud puddle that I couldn't drive back out of. I was on a mountain, just below the snow line. It was the middle of summer. I took off my shoes, jumped out into the knee-high water, and tried to push my car out from behind. Alone. It wasn't a great plan, but there weren't a lot of bystanders on top of the mountain in question. I gave up when I walked back to the window to discover that not only had the car not budged, but it spent all that time filling up with water instead, only deepening the quagmire. There was also no cell service that far out. But I was lucky to get picked up a few miles down the road by a Forest Service contractor who flew off the handle when he found out what the government had made me do to fulfill my duties. They just reintroduced wolves to the forest near here last year. They can't make you do this. What little savings I had accrued during this passing tenure as a government agent was quickly absorbed by my mechanic, who had to replace a computer in the floorboards of my mud-logged Honda. During all of this, I continued making sketch comedy videos for YouTube, still hoping that somehow it would morph into something financially viable. Needless to say, it did not. Some of the skits were almost funny, at least. Through all of this, I managed to pick up the occasional web design or video client. Most of them paid me eventually, but rarely without a struggle, and occasionally with direct verbal abuse. One insult hound douchemonger threatened to sue me when I finally quit working for him, which turned into a quick education on contract law. A cool breeze of employment luck came when I managed to score another temporary position as a photo editor for a school photography company. I'll be honest, it was mundane work, but it was also the first healthy work environment I'd stumbled into in what felt like forever. Dorian Photography, you did right by me. Thanks for the lack of fistfights, Mick and John. There's something to be said as well for having a job with very clear goals and boundaries, showing up to get X number of tasks done before clocking out for the day. It left me with a little bit of brain power left at the end of the day if I wanted to write or try to grow my own projects. On building my own business, and the struggle seemed insurmountable. I was losing hope in the future and slowly, steadily, belief in myself. I felt like I had been someone else living abroad, like I had grown muscles that were now slowly atrophying. I struggled to make ends meet, spent many a night staring at the ceiling, wondering how badly the overdraft fees were going to hurt when my loan payment or car insurance premium came through the next day. I moved into a new house with some friends, which provided an upper bunk to stare at instead of a ceiling, but the thoughts and worries were much the same. At least this time, I was acting as my own crisis, burning through what would have been my savings. I kept trying to find work, cold called businesses with crappy websites to ask if they'd like a less crappy website, did whatever I could to drum up some business. I was not very successful. Wait, scratch that. I felt like a downright failure. I also felt betrayed, like a future that had been promised me all my life had turned to smoke right as I reached out to grab it. Things got dark. I didn't fully realize it, but I was losing trust in many, if not all, the institutions I had trusted since childhood, namely the university and the church. I wasn't just struggling to put food on the table, which I was. My identity was in crisis. And this drawing needs no introduction. It's one of my favorites, I think, honestly, out of in the whole book. Anyway, let me sniffle. Whew. Hope that mute button's working properly. Oh yeah, no jet skis if you're broke, Dixie. Bad idea. Very bad idea. All right. You can always fall farther. I'll forever remember the day my roommates told me of their daring plan to get into a local pharmaceutical company by picking up temp work and, eventually, getting hired on as full-time employees. It sounded like an ill-conceived script for a low-budget heist movie. It felt like an absolute affront. It meant going for a job I absolutely did not want, that I knew would only detract from my ability to build something on my own. But you can't eat dreams. Sounds like something my grandpa would have said. And the people around me were quick to remind me that I didn't deserve to attain them, in the same strange tone that was supposed to comfort the saved who truly deserved hell. I'm not kidding. At least you have blank, insert job. You know that in the grand scheme of things, you don't deserve anything, so be grateful. I had a few of those conversations. Low-level gaslighting that leaves you thinking perhaps you are an overprivileged piece of garbage for thinking that maybe, just maybe, all that talk about doing something you loved meant you had a chance to do something you loved. Some obscure myth that I heard once or twice along the way. American Pie? American Cream? Yeah, something like that. So when my roommates told me they were going to try for these temp jobs at a pharma company, the remnants of my soul recoiled. But I didn't have much to do that day, and there was a severe amount of guilt involved in staying home to rest instead of work, so I joined them for the interview and aptitude testing. I figured, why not? If you get some work, my inner optimist chimed in, you can quit as soon as another design job comes through. We took our tests, which, if you're looking for the world's most depressing ego boost, try taking aptitude tests in a temp agency testing center. And we're assured that getting hired on would be easy enough with the next wave. As a first intermediate gig, we moved old broken furniture out of a department store downtown. This isn't so bad, my inner optimist chimed in, or continued to chirp. You need the money, and hey, by the time you're done with this department store, I bet you get another design client. Out of here before you ever set foot in that place. When we got the news that we were getting hired on at the pharmaceutical company, I was the opposite of excited. My inner optimist lost some traction as I had no excuse not to take the job, no other immediate options, and I was raised to work. My own sense of personal value was locked into this idea of productivity, of knuckling down and manning up. I took the gig. The first real blow wasn't taking the job at all. I knew it was what I had to do, but I had spent well over a year trying to build something of my own and consistently stumbling along the way. For some reason, this move, above all others, felt like admitting defeat. It tasted like failure, and this was long before my palate had grown accustomed. The second blow was discovering my two roommates would be working together, but on a different shift and in a different department from me. I went into this stupid thing with the consolation that at least I'd be hanging out with them doing it. Instead, I was in it alone. The third came from showing up and donning all of the sterile gear, getting through the paperwork and being shown to the quality control line I was supposed to work for that day, being shoved into a room I knew nothing about, and then berated for not knowing anything. Frustrated, they sat me in the corner with a 4-inch binder filled to bursting with standard operating procedures. Read this. You need to know it. Hundreds of pages that might as well have been written in Chinese. Later that year, they would spend some $2 million rewriting that very book so that it would be legible for the established staff, let alone newcomers like me. But in that moment, I sat alone in the corner cubicle of an overlit white room, staring at pages that made no sense to me despite 4 years of higher education. I stared at them, blindly turning the pages out of the simple fear of losing a job I didn't want in the first place, and broke into tears. Get me out. I'm actually scratching my eye. Don't worry, there's not a tear in my eye. It's just, got an itch. Get me out of here. Farmaland, 2010. Uh-oh, my book cover is conveniently placed to cover the main part of the drawings. Whoops. Thanks, Swirly, for letting me know. I'll try to do better. Unfortunately, the computer hates me. The pharmaceutical company in question was housed in a campus of blocky white buildings. Sanitized, industrial, and hierarchical in every way from security access to the layout of the parking lot. The distance I had to walk after parking my car reminded me daily how far down the hierarchy I was. I showed up every morning by myself with a conflicted sense of dread. I was grateful to have work, but I hated the job. Taking a job for the money because your dreams aren't panning out so well leaves you with a strange tension, to say the least, especially when it's barely enough money to begin with. You know you should be happy that you can pay your bills, but also know you're treading water at best. It can't last. Covering yourself in oversized industry standard garments doesn't do wonders for the old ego either. I was a nameless, faceless, whitewashed cog in a machine making someone else rich. Stupid rich. Off the suffering of others, no less. While my roommates, at least, had the novelty of picking venom sacs out of dead yellow jackets, picking bee butts, as they called it, to balance out the mundane nature of their work, all I did was package vials into small boxes and place those small boxes into bigger boxes before sealing them all together and moving them into cold storage, a big cold box. I was so glad I'd gotten a bachelor's degree for this. Quality control was the other half of the job. Imagine, if you will, sitting on a stool for 30 minutes, squinting through a magnifying glass the size of your face. On the other side of the lens, an endless string of tiny glass vials slides spinning past, filled with what might as well be milk. In reality, it's the time you'll never get back. You're looking for cracks in the glass to show themselves under the light, for anything that doesn't look like milk to reveal itself spinning in the milk. It was swine flu vaccine, but I couldn't even find it in me to care at the time. You spot an irregularity in a vial, you pluck it from the line with your tweezers, and place it in the appropriate bin. The good vials get spat onto a metal table where they slide to the other half of the team, who scoop them up with special forks, place them into perfectly sized boxes, and then place them into appropriate, larger boxes. After 30 minutes, you switch from inspecting to boxing. If you get into it, there are moments where it can be fun to compete to pack the most tiny boxes. There can be something strangely satisfying in the rhythmic pattern of it all. If you have some cool coworkers, which thankfully I had a couple, you might even laugh once in a while and have a decent break. I still felt like I was drowning. Things slowly got better than they were on day one. I got into the job and managed fine. I even developed a minor crush on one of the scientists supervising us, but was too embarrassed by my situation to do anything about it. As I recall, she was my age and really clever. I also recall that I was cloaked in a frock that removed all signs of personality, so whether or not she could tell that I was locked away in there somewhere, under layers of linen and self-doubt, it's hard to say. Even as a few new clients came through for my smorgasbord design business, the reality came home that it was not enough. I couldn't rely on it. I settled into the fact that I was there for the full length of the project. If I could just make it to April, I would be able to save some money and complete the task at hand. What threw a wrench in the gears, simultaneously boosting and weakening my resolve, was the day my dad told me that he and my mom were considering joining mercy ships. For those of you just meeting my happy little family, there are 4 of us: mom, dad, sister, and me. I grew up in Pullman, a small university town surrounded by wheat fields in the southeastern corner of Washington state. For you foreigners, I'm looking at you, French Laura, we're not talking about the capital of the United States here. Washington state is on the opposite side of the country, in the northwest. It's home to Seattle, Grey's Anatomy, 50 Shades, Starbucks, Amazon, and it's just a hop north of California. For the entirety of my life up to this point, my dad had been a pastor of a small church comprised mostly of college students. Aha! You just shouted and threw your book across the room. That explains probably a lot of things. We can get into the nuances of my pastor's kid's psychoses another time. For now, all that's really important to know is that I was born in Pullman, and 3 years later, we moved into the house that I would grow up in. This is the house my parents lived in up to this point, and my dad was still pastoring the church he'd pastored for 27 years. This stable track record suggested a solid sense of inertia that I never questioned. My mom, in particular, seemed bent on staying put forever, so it came as a shock to hear him say that they were thinking of moving on. Not only that, they were thinking of moving to Africa? On a hospital ship? As far as midlife crises go, this one seemed to me to be particularly severe. The shock came not so much from the idea itself, but that my mom was okay with it? Not only okay with it, she seemed to be all for it. You aren't a doctor. I think it was supposed to be a question, but I bet it came out flat. We were eating Chinese food from the Safeway deli down the street from my bunk bed in Spokane. No, but they have lots of other jobs on the ship. My dad was a bit reluctant at the beginning of the conversation, excited for the possibilities, but I think a little worried his kids wouldn't approve. They need staff trainers, audiovisual people. They even need a videographer. Videographer? I'll be honest, I was skeptical. Not because I wouldn't be excited to see my parents off on an adventure, but because I couldn't recall my dad ever shooting any video over the course of my entire life. I asked my sister. She couldn't recall, or she can't either. Simultaneously, a series of dormant synapses sparked to life at the mention of the word. The main concern is whether or not they'll let us go to the ship long term because of your mom's illness. My mom had been diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's just 2 years prior. But otherwise, we're all in. The conversation stuck with me, not least of all because someone needed a videographer in West Africa. I could do that. They spoke French in a lot of West Africa. I could do that too. Images of an ocean, simultaneously real and figurative, began to stir in my dormant imagination. My dad sent my sister and me an email with a link to the website, and I found myself completely enraptured by the idea of this hospital ship. I dug deep into their website, fascinated by the work and this big white ship that worked nonstop to alleviate the suffering of what they called the forgotten poor. What they did was incredible, and I am not exaggerating, even now. Do a Google search for Mercy Ship's 60 Minutes video, and you'll be blown away. Life-changing surgery for people who could never afford it in countries that couldn't provide it. They removed massive tumors that grew to the size of the heads to which they were attached. They straightened legs and released burn contractures. They removed cataracts by the thousands. There was no need to sell me on anything. Their work sold itself. And they had an urgent need for a videographer. I sent them an email without hesitation. And that takes us to chapter 2, joining mercy ships. But that's also where we stop, potentially, for the night, depending on how we're doing on the old book sales. Thank you for listening so far. I hope you're enjoying it. Looks like we've got a few people in here hanging out. Also, Andrew and Grace, thank you so much for your super chats. I appreciate it. And especially because you warmed the room back up. It was green for a while there, but the red or orange really worked. That's a good idea. Hey, Google, make the lights orange. Maybe that qualifies as orange right now. I don't know. I thought this was red. Maybe I'm going colorblind from staring at the screen for so long. I don't know. Anyways, let's check on that. Before we do, let me take a drink. Again, if we sold 10 books during this portion of the reading, then I'll continue on with what my patrons voted on and came in second place, which is a more fun chapter. This chapter is kind of heavy, but it's like the intro. Gets us started and shoots us off towards West Africa fairly quickly. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm glad you're here. And then there's a fun one where we're in the Canary Islands in Spain, and you know, I go on some pretty bad dates. One of which ends up in an emergency room in Spain, and I don't speak Spanish, so that's not the best. Ooh, so we've got, looks like we only sold 3 more copies. I'm gonna update my little numbers here. No, I'm not gonna update them because we gotta keep the numbers the same, but that's okay. I guess it just means that we'll wrap this up here in a minute. I'll give you a second. What I'm going to do, in case you're on the fence and you're thinking about buying a copy of the book, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, know what I mean? There's a link in the description below the video. What I'll do is because the other thing I wanted to do before we left, and I'll just do that now, is thank all the people who chipped in for virtual coffees, because there are a lot of you, and I'm really excited about that. And honestly, even if you don't buy a book today, this is more important. I want to sell books. Don't get me wrong. I got to make money, and I want to sell books, and I want you to enjoy it. I want you to read it. But it's not that important. I mean, it's important to me. But there are other people that need some help right now. So if you want to buy a virtual coffee instead, I'll be giving that straight to the coffee shops, buying us some virtual coffee that we can share together in a live stream soon, because we already crossed the goal. So we'll probably do a live stream of that like next week. Also, it's really hot in this. Even though the fire is not real, it's really, really hot in this scarf right now. I might have to change my costume a little bit. So let's go through and thank all the people by name who gave today, assuming that they left their name, and bought virtual coffees. By the time I get to the end of this list, which is actually pretty long, because it's like 100 people. Not 100 people. Is it 100 people? It's like a lot of people. Which, thank you so much. It's really exciting. I'm going to go back, double check the book sales. If we're up, ebooks count. All of it counts. If it's up a little bit. Maybe I'll read you another chapter here tonight. Okay, Oliver G was first. Thanks, Oliver. I sent him a note when I was getting it all set up, so he got to jump the gun. And Richard as well is right after him. It helps to get like the early announcements, doesn't it? These guys, they were on it. They were on it real quick. Leda, who's in here? I think Leda Kennedy's in here. Thank you so much. Somebody. Don't know who that was, but thank you, somebody. There are a number of somebodies. Dale Richards, good to have you in here. I think Emily Brooks is in here right now. Thanks, Emily. Paul H., which I'm going to guess is Paul Horton, who asked for a double espresso. Eric L., I'm glad that you're here as well, my friend. Ron, as usual. Fenikadas. I don't think I've ever actually said your name out loud. Fenikadas. I like that. It rolls off the tongue. DJ, always. Thanks, buddy. Sophie Buchanan. Anon. All right. KB for the win. I think I know who that was. Saying KB for the win, but they said anonymous, so I can't give them away. Anne, thank you so much. Liz, Beta Eric, Mystery Man, as always. Somebody, again, another somebody. Anna, thank you so much. Robert Weaver, 8YN. I recognized the photo, but we'll just go with 8YN because Aiton? Is that how you'd say that? Aidian? Lara, thank you so much. Oh, I can't wait. We get to some nationalized Lauras later. One of whom you know, one of whom you might not. Sandra Coble, so stick around because this name reading is going to be good. Bethany, thank you so much. I'm so glad. Susie Q, always here, Susie Q. Abe, thank you so much. Esther, Janae, the Rabbits Riot Theater Company. It's a fantastic name for a theater company. Dawn, Oh man, that's so good. Niranjana Kavatar. Where's the emphasis on that one? Anon again. Dixie Rose in here. Jeremy, thank you so much. Cindy Hardigan. Mustbeckeris. That's amazing. Coffee. Nora, thank you very much. Inez Gueva. Guvea. I'm sorry if I mispronounce names. It's I have an affectation. Emma, Angela Youssef, thank you so much. Bert Edens, Adam and Chrissy Gifford. French Laura, there's the first national Laura. French Laura's in here, that's really nice. Rachel, Roy, Kendall, Nancy Ahuda, Dutch Laura. There's the other Laura, she's a Peloton regular. Somebody and another somebody. Roy, Debbie Susan, Jen, or Jeannie, depending on if it's an American pronunciation. Nick Adams, Claudia, Pat. Oh, hey, Pat. Anon, again. Maria C. Stephanie, Steve Oswald, Gina White, Sandra, Michelle, Tracy. Kind regards, James Arthur. James, you've got the long. I love the longest, most amazing usernames. I like that a lot. Kind regards. You got it in there too. Like, I know what you meant. I think you hit the limit, but still managed to make it make sense. Deborah Lantane Dene. Lantane? Did I say that right? You can correct me in comments. Sorry about that. Eileen, Claudia, Deborah LaRocque, and Sarah. There we go. I'm going to refresh just in case anybody jumped in there while I was reading them. And then we're going to go over to Sendowl. One last try. We'll see where we're at with these little book sales. Looks like we're still a little bit short for another chapter tonight. But we can set something up. If you guys enjoyed this, let me know. In the comments if you're watching this later, or in the live stream chat right now if you're watching this. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed it. We might be able to do another one of these down the road, I suppose. Also, I'm taking the scarf off. I know it's a little bit risque. Ladies, but I'm sweating. I'm literally sweating, and this fire is psyching me out a little bit too, to that effect, I think, right in front of me. I hope that you are enjoying. You'll buy 7 more books just to keep me reading. I mean, you can do that. I don't think that's cheating. And I'll honor that. If you do that, I'll read one more chapter. If we get there, if we do this whole 10 book thing, then I'll stick around, and I'll read some more chapters. So I'm gonna have another sip here. We'll see. No pressure. Don't throw those things around lightly. I mean, come on. For those of you that already own it, don't worry. You don't have to do that. I appreciate it. I'm happy to do it, but I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I hope you liked the fireplace as well. I wanted to get like an actual, I'd love to read in an actual big chair next to a real fireplace and all that. No fireplaces allowed in this city, especially not in a tiny little space like mine. No. But it looks like everybody enjoyed it. That was great. I'm glad you liked it. All right. I'm going to go and I'm going to refresh. We're going to give this a minute. So if you guys are hanging out, grab a beer, grab a drink, grab a coffee, whatever you want. Come back in like 3 minutes. I'm still going to be here. And I'm going to sit here until 8:55. At 8:55, I'll hit this refresh button over here. If the numbers go up significantly enough to make that those 10, then we'll keep reading. I'm sure there are people watching this right now in the future who didn't get to see it live, who just bought a book and are furious that I didn't count their future sales. But I can't see into the future. Sorry, it's not one of my skills. Just go check in on here. I see Richard's chatting with you guys a little bit, which is good. Glad you're still in here, buddy. Hope you're surviving. Please do chapter 3. So we got some good requests, and also like some super chats in there. I mean, it's gonna be pretty hard to turn you guys down. Whoa. Another super chat. Hold on, gotta scroll down. See, Joe, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, well, you guys might be winning me over here a little bit. Come on, shucks. I hope you do make it back, Andrea. It's Paris is a great place to be. I'm lucky to be here. I'm really lucky to be here. Might not be able to go anywhere for a long time. I appreciate it, you guys. Thank you so much. Ruth. Oh, thank you for buying a copy of the book. See, I probably should have waited anyways, just to see. Oh, Chris bought a copy of the ebook. Oh, good. I got Deb's pronunciation right. That's good. I'm always nervous reading out, like, especially for my patrons, because some of them, like, I don't. Yanni knows I don't speak Finnish. Thankfully, he still likes me because I'm bad at some of these names. Dana, I thought about doing this on Twitch. I would have double streamed to this and Twitch, but I was having problems with the restream, which splits it for you between the two. And I didn't want to screw it up on this first try, but maybe next time we'll do both. Or maybe I'll just do it on Twitch. Who knows? That could be a lot of fun. I appreciate that. Let's see. Yeah, Sophie's time zones, they'll get you. They'll get you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. It is, I have a feeling that I might be able to get away with refreshing this early, and then we can get started on the next chapter. I gotta cool down. Cool down a bit. I should have waited another 2 minutes to refresh. We'll wait another 2 more minutes, but I have a feeling after, all of you guys being so generous and kind, and super chat as well, and everything else, I might be talked into it. We're not that far off. I'm not that far off. Just feel like, you set the rules. You got to stand by them for a second, at least. But that initiated some yays. There we go. See, Tim's thrown in there too. I'm glad you're enjoying this. Okay. Hannah, Max, Dana. Do it. What's the plan for 2020? Staying inside and away from people, probably. I don't know. We'll see. How can we have plans right now? How? I don't know. I don't know that I can have plans. Ginger, thank you so much. All right. You guys are winning me over with all this super chat. The super chat's what's going to end up doing it more than anything else. Because you guys, I can't not dance for you. I'm like a little monkey here. Also, do you guys hear music? I feel like every once in a while I hear music. Are they playing music in the logs when I'm not paying attention? Oh, I just heard that though. That was exciting. That's not the music I thought I was hearing though. Thank you. Okay. Here we go. Can I do it without the scarf at least? Hopefully you guys won't. If I can do it without the scarf, I'll go a little bit farther. I'll read you another chapter. It's not going to be chapter 2. It's actually going to be chapter... let me find it. Whoops. Headings. Oh, it is chapter 3. Good work. Whoever knew that it was chapter 3, you did your homework. You came into this with... Somebody's read the book already. I'm sorry, Marie Claire. Well, I hope that it works out. I have no idea what to expect. They did just announce. Okay, this is going to be no downers. I'm not going to talk. We're not talking about the world situation. I was about to tell you things. We can talk about it another time. We can talk about it on the coffee one. We can be as depressed as we want on the coffee one because that one was inspired by world events. So we'll save the world events for that one. Whew. Yeah, I can't. I don't want to make any predictions. No predictions. Sorry, guys. No scarf needed. Okay, thank you, Karen. Then, fire still going. Oh, it's so soothing. I just want to listen to this and fall asleep. Thanks for the light change. Okay. It's hard to focus. Thank you. Oh, Mystery Man. Thank you. I'm not going to start that. That's dangerous if I start doing that. Whew. Okay. Let us keep reading. Do you have your beer? Everybody ready? Do you have your drink? Whatever it is you're cheersing. Just over halfway down on this one. Really enjoying this IPA a lot. Thank you, Esther. Appreciate it. 86 the scarf. Dixie. 86 the scarf. Look at you. Okay. Oh, look at us. Just look at us. All right. Chapter 3. Remember, please, if you're enjoying this by the end and you haven't grabbed a copy yet, and you can, it'd be great if you did. Should be doing a better job promoting this than I am, but that's what we're trying to do. Oh, sorry. Before I cleared up. All right. Chapter 3. Canaries to Paris. A road paved with love and splinters. Rolling bunks. I learned a lot during my time with mercy ships. How to ride a motorcycle in sand. How to suture a wound. You don't want me doing your stitches unless I'm your last option. And how to pick locks, to name a few. Great loves I discovered was sleeping at sea. The transition from land to sea is an awkward one, but I don't think I've ever seen a movie properly represent what it's like to set foot on land for the first time in 2 weeks. I mean, Jack Sparrow just waltzed onto that dock like he'd never even left it. At least he showed the same level of wobble, regardless of the surface upon which he sauntered. Granted, I had never had a soundtrack, but my experience was different on a number of fronts. Everyone talks about getting your sea legs, but no one talks about needing to find your land sense of goddamn balance after scrolling down the gangway. There might be some swears in this book, by the way, which normally are not on my YouTube channel, but I probably should have forewarned you about that from the beginning. It's disconcerting to find that the earth is moving with the vigor of the sea you thought you left behind. Also, thank you, Jody. I saw that. I'm going to start ignoring the chat now. Sorry, distracted. Back to the book. We'll go back to the swear word too. We'll do that chat. We're just gonna do that paragraph over again, so you can hear me swear again if that tickled your ribs. Granted, I never had a. Granted, I gotta do that. Let's throw myself off. Granted, I never had a soundtrack, but my experience was different on a number of fronts. Everyone talks about getting your sea legs, but no one talks about needing to find your land sense of goddamn balance after strolling down the gangway. It's disconcerting to find that the earth is moving with the vigor of the sea you thought you left behind. Out at sea, I slept like a baby. Everyone gets seasick at one point or another, but thankfully, in the voyages I undertook, I never experienced it. Was the mind-numbing exhaustion of keeping my balance all the time. Imagine walking down a long, featureless, and windowless hallway. There are no visual cues or signs of movement, except that as you walk forward, gravity's pull consistently shifts from somewhere off to your left to somewhere on your right, before swinging back again. This does a number on your monkey brain, which can't quite figure out why everything looks stable but feels all rumbly and tumbly. There are two sources of extra calorie burn going on here as well. One, walking like a saddle-sore cowboy stumbling home after an all-night bender and his first brush with civilization after a 3-month cattle rush requires extra effort, spurs or no. Two, the brain is energy hungry enough as it is, without the whole world tumbling around all the livelong day. Struggling to maintain balance in an ever-changing environment, decoding never-ending optical illusions, and constant motion requires more than sitting in a nice, static coffee shop, writing at a stable table. Hello. This means that when it comes time to hit the sack, your gray matter is more than ready to shut down as quickly as possible so it can regroup and try to figure out what the hell is going on. Combine this with the natural bob and sway of the ship, and you literally get rocked to sleep. One trick that helps with this is to find a foam wedge and shove it under the side of your mattress that isn't against a wall. This will tilt you towards said wall enough to keep you from rolling out of bed. Do this, and you're set for the best sleep of your life. Sleeping with bunkmates, however, can be a totally different story. I had one who snored so loudly he woke the women sleeping on the other side of the steel bulkhead by vibrating their bed frames. He did this consistently and introduced me to my first real bout with sleep deprivation, which, by extension, introduced me to my first brush with murderous thoughts. I had another bunkmate who I always tried to beat to bed because his body odor was so oppressive it felt like a physical cloud. Think Pigpen from Peanuts, but without the cartoon charm. If I didn't fall asleep before he rocked up, there was a good chance I wouldn't be able to for hours. Even then, I wasn't safe. I woke up choking on his stink cloud more than once. And I really wish this were a hyperbolic retelling. Of all the adjustments to ship life, sharing a cabin with 3 other grown men was one of the biggest. But life in West Africa was definitely full of much bigger surprises. From the Canaries with love. The Canary Islands. Assuming you don't get swept away by hordes of drunken Englishmen, it's hard not to have a good time. Although, to be fair, I'd argue you haven't been to the Canaries unless you've fallen in love in the Canaries, which means I've barely been to the Canaries, but I've been nonetheless. I tried falling in love in the Canaries on 3 separate occasions and failed twice, although I feel like the attempts were worth the failing. Attempt number 1, Euro Cup final win. This is the kind of stuff I never get into in my vlogs, so buckle up, y'all. Jeez, mildly self-conscious right now. You know those days where you keep crossing paths with the same beautiful person and you start to wonder, is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Caught in a landslide, no sky. Sorry, but you know the feeling. This instance involved a Swedish woman with whom I first crossed paths at Burger King in Tenerife. Not the most romantic start, but hey, it's where we were. I need to take a moment to thank the ship's head chef for this because he had worked pretty hard over the span of our voyage up from Lome, Togo, to convince me that a Whopper was actually a decent burger. I took up his challenge on the day of the Euro Cup final and made my way into town ahead of my friends, who were fine living the Whopper-free lifestyle they had constructed for themselves over the previous year. She was in line ahead of me with a group of friends, and in one of those moments you wish weren't so memorable for being so rare, caught my eye and held it. Sparks passing in a glance like that can give a person an instantaneous overabundance of confidence. She had a stick of face paint prearranged in the shape of the Spanish flag, and I asked her to paint one on my face for the match. We would continue to cross paths for the rest of the day. She even rushed over after a goal and gave me a peck on the cheek. I'm kicking myself as I write this because I was still deeply inhibited by a lifetime of conservative shame, not to mention the friends who were watching the match with me. How inhibited, you may be asking? Well, the Spanish win. We all make our way down to the waterfront, where there's a fountain surrounded by a massive pool. The Swedish woman strips to her underwear, hands me her clothes, and prances back into the water with a look that still makes me dizzy 7 years later. And you know what I did? I handed her clothes to her friend and went home. Because that's what you do when you live on a vessel of judgment mischaracterized as the Love Boat. I was too scared to jump in the water with her, especially in front of a bunch of other mercy shippers. And now you know the story of why I don't live in Stockholm today. I need to go for a walk. The Freetown Jitters. Our first screening day in Freetown was obviously traumatic. It was not how I said, that's in chapter 2, so you don't know how obvious that is yet, but chapter 2, you'll know. It's not how I suggest opening any new chapter in life, let alone in a new part of the world. I hardly left the ship for months afterward if I could help it. Any trip outside the port set my heart pounding. We had a second, much more successful screening day in a smaller, more controlled location, and I volunteered for overnight security. I also got picked by our off-ship security officer, one of those special forces guys I mentioned earlier, to act as our managing director's personal bodyguard. This resulted in no small amount of ribbing from my friends, and our MD wasn't thrilled by the idea either. But we had 10 months in Freetown, and over time my screeching anxieties faded into a dull hum. Recalling the events from that day would cause me to break out into a sweat for years to come, but I learned how to function in the city and came to really enjoy it. I even managed to publish my first finished novel. Writing on the ship was a challenge that developed an unlikely discipline. Writing in any environment. Imagine trying to write in a busy cafe where everyone feels perfectly comfortable sitting at your table and starting a conversation with you, or with whoever is nearby, regardless of how big your headphones and leave me alone death stare may be. You've got an inkling of the setting. Somehow, I managed to maintain some level of writing regularity. White Shores, the first book in my Vitalis Chronicles fantasy trilogy, was released at an epic launch party on my birthday. The party itself was put on by a number of friends on the ship, organized by two in particular, Liz and Dulce, and remains one of the best memories in my publishing career to date. It was one of the things that made my time in Freetown truly special. My job, however, was the worst. Jumping right back into complaining about jobs, a chapter later. I didn't get hired on to make videos, as you might remember, and then once I got to the ship, I was approached about joining the team to make videos. But by that time, I'd seen the dysfunction of the communications department on full display and opted to stick with my job of running soundboards and keeping the ship's TV systems working. This wasn't necessarily a mistake. It was just an unfortunate choice out of two bad options. I hated my job, partially because it was inherently boring to me. Just because you can set up a stage doesn't mean you're made to set up stages, and partially because it set me right in the middle of about a dozen crosshairs. Like a parabolic focal point of professional ire. I very quickly became the whipping boy for a lot of the ship's leadership, who saw any technical error during one of their presentations as a personal affront. Never you mind the fact that we were working with a jumbled mess of equipment through which even Dr. Frankenstein would have hesitated to run electricity. A big part of my job was organizing volunteers from the crew to run the soundboard and slides for the music's lyrics. That way, I wasn't pulling an extra 10 hours of work a week going to rehearsals and every major meeting. A few poorly timed issues, half of which were user errors to begin with, suddenly landed me with the obligation to attend every major meeting. I basically lived in the International Lounge, the ship's version of an amphitheater, and I came to loathe it. What made it harder was that I genuinely respected these people. In other circumstances, I knew I would have liked most of them, and most would go on to become great friends. But at the time, I couldn't stand it. One of my favorites, who will remain nameless, would find me on any given weekend and follow me around screaming, occasionally to the point that he would begin weeping with rage because I hadn't switched on one of the ship's 4 TV channels over to golf. No exaggeration. We had a system for signing up to have the channels switched to whichever you preferred, and you were allowed a certain number of hours per week. This both seemed to be beneath the crew member in mention, and also somehow less efficient than verbally abusing me on a regular basis. I love this guy now, but it was really bad. It was probably a combination of circumstances, stress, and who knows what else. Because with rare exception, I came to really enjoy all of the people who terrorized me as the audiovisual technician. The Screamer and I would become friends on a golf course in Togo. He gave me the best piece of golfing advice I have ever received. But this was then, and it was hell. Server rooms are cold. I started looking into returning to the English teaching program I had done in Nice. I wasn't thinking of leaving the ship. I was committed, but I also knew I'd be stupid not to prepare a potential exit. I signed up and put Paris at the top of my list. We left Freetown at the end of our field service and docked in Tema, Ghana for a short refit between field services. I found myself lashed to the ship because, despite having Accra and all sorts of interesting places to visit on our Christmas break, a shocking number of the crew just wanted to stay on board and watch football. And the satellite dish, standing on a rusted-out tripod on the dock, was in constant need of adjustment in order to keep it aligned and functioning. The self-adjusting onboard version was way out of our budget. Thankfully, manual calibrations are cheap, if wildly frustrating. Go off to see a movie or explore Accra, and I would stand on the dock realigning a satellite dish, which I would one day relish throwing in a dumpster. When I finally broke down in the ship's server room, crying in the corner behind racks of technology that hated me, I made the move to transfer to the reception department and got the heck out of the IT office. Reception was more social, and thanks to its role in emergency services, carried a more central sense of responsibility. I was put in a mild management role over the team and proceeded to enjoy Lomé markedly more than I had enjoyed Sierra Leone. This is where my best motorcycle stories all come from, but those are for another book. Being in reception means being trapped behind a desk in the crossroads of the ship because you're the first responder in case of fire. If there are 2 of you, one can walk away. If you're on your own, you can leave only when someone trained on the fire panel is available to relieve you. This makes for some pretty drab nights on night shift. It also means that you're susceptible to a little over-socialization. It's worse for women because who knows what random guy is going to lean against the counter and talk endlessly at you. In this guy's mind, you aren't trapped. You're totally interested. On a ship that's 75% women, it can happen to men occasionally too. Even me. Just suspend your disbelief for a moment. Attempt number 2. A woman in uniform. I had some solid chemistry with a woman who was a fellow receptionist on the ship. Even if I was still out of my depth when it came to pulling proverbial triggers, we had a lot of fun together. When you work with an attractive person in close quarters, and you have great energy generating a lot of laughs, things have a tendency to heat up. It's basic thermodynamics. Now, this isn't to say that workplace romances are a good idea, especially when you live in the same metal box and share a lot of the same friends and common spaces. But come on, how could things go wrong? To be fair, I had been severely burned by the woman I dated in Togo. There are some great stories in there involving first kisses, one of the aforementioned motorcycle crashes, a lot of them actually, and getting robbed at borders, but again, different book. So at the time, I was decidedly skittish when it came to getting close to anyone. I was exhausted, burned out, and still a little bit heartbroken. But she pursued me a little bit, which was nice. even joining me for the occasional nap in my cabin. Snuggles only. Kick, kick, kick. Fast forward to the Canary Islands, and I decided that I should man up and ask her out on a proper date. We had all of Gran Canaria to explore, from the relative discomfort of dry dock, and I wanted to share it with someone. So we picked a night where, and I should have said it, that's not how I should, and I wanted to share it with someone, is how I should have said that. That didn't sound good the first way I read that. So we picked a night where neither of us were working and made plans to head out for dinner. Things even leveled up when the Spanish national director offered us a ride out of the port and to the boardwalk in his car. Anyone who has the pleasure of walking a couple of miles through a port to get back to civilization will immediately recognize this as a win, date or no. The director pulled up to the boardwalk and stopped the car. I hopped out and held the door for the lady in question. She promptly swung it shut behind her. He started to drive off. My right index finger attempted to go with him. There are moments in life where you can feel panic try to inject itself into a situation. Realizing you didn't put enough postage on the envelope when you filed your taxes. Waking up an hour late for your first day on your consulting job. Or suddenly spotting a spider right as you turn off the lights all come to mind. This wasn't nearly as traumatic as any number of other situations in which I'd found myself, but having my index finger slammed in the door of a now-moving vehicle was certainly reason enough for a little adrenaline hit. She, however, freaked out. I calmly asked the director to stop the car, which thankfully he did. I asked her to open the door, the handle of which I couldn't reach on my own. After wiping the blood away to check the circular hole that had been punched in my finger, I asked the director if he would be so kind as to take me to the nearest emergency room. He dropped us off and asked if we'd be okay. No hablo español. To which I confidently responded, yes, because why not? She was kind enough to stick around for a while, but got hungry, as people do. She left me, sitting in the ER, holding my bloody but hopefully not broken finger, in a hospital where I didn't speak the language and had no indication that I'd ever get seen by a secretary, let alone a medical professional. I can't blame her. I was hungry too. But I can say that this may have killed the vibe. Which way is out? I'd worked in reception for something like 6 months at this point and was more than ready to get on to Paris. My application to teach English had snagged me a job at, well, very close to my first preference of Paris. This was the same English teaching program I had entered in Nice, Tapif, which at 11 hours per week is more of a cultural exchange than a real job. But it was a visa that could get me back to France for a longer stint. At the same time, I had an offer from Mercy Ship's global office to work as a copywriter and editor, which meant I could continue working for Mercy Ships while taking a break from the ship itself. This was the perfect combination for the moment. Excuse me. My dad had a role in training new ship brought to him. My dad had a role in training new crew that brought him to the ship regularly, speaking of typos, which was a rare luxury. These visits were always a perk for 2 reasons. First, it was time I got to spend with my dad, plain and simple. Coincided with the end of my time on the ship, so we were going to get to leave together. The second was who he was traveling with. One of the most exciting, gossip-churning events we enjoyed as long-term crew was getting to meet the new round of freshly trained long-term crew. Short-term crew are great, don't get me wrong, but they're gone in a flash. It's the long-termers who form the core of your friendships and, of course, offer the most romantic possibility. One of our jobs in reception was processing new crew of all stripes, which meant we got the first look, which was usually unflattering considering the state in which many of them arrived, especially if they just finished a few weeks up country somewhere. My buddy Josh nearly died on his field training service and was covered in bites from some bug straight out of a horror flick. No jokes. We took photos, printed badges, stored passports, and got them to sign their lives away before giving them a brief safety instruction and sending them off to eat shrink-wrapped leftovers in the dining hall. You know, glamour work. Personally, and this will come as a total shock, I was over it. My dad was going to show up, I'd get through processing his new group, and then we could hang out. We were going to rent motorcycles and head up to the volcano. We were going to see dolphins. We had some seriously magical father-son stuff to do and get going before I hopped a flight to Mercy Ship's headquarters in Texas with him to get ready for Paris. I had a visa to claim and a new chapter to start. And then she walked on board. Attempt number 3. Last moment, first sight. Now, I know what you're thinking. Keep that disbelief suspended. Because she never believed this story either. But I very distinctly remember seeing her come on board, and my shell cracked a little bit. I thought she was beautiful in a way that should be captured in marble. And that was it. I closed the crack in my shell as best I could, and ground my way through processing the group. We took their passports, gave them their first safety speech, and sent them off to eat cold leftovers. My dad and I rode motorcycles up to the top of the volcano. We saw dolphins. We had a magical time. Then we left the ship, I thought, never to return. And that's the end of chapter 3. It's a shorter one. Chapter 4 is entitled, I Actually Got to Paris. So, if you want to read more about how Jay really first got to Paris and this woman, that end of the chapter, foreshadowing, maybe you should grab a copy of the book if you haven't done that already. I think it'd be great. Anyways, thanks for watching, everyone. I wonder if you guys have caught up to me here. Basic thermodynamics. I'm glad you like that. I'm glad you guys enjoyed these. I'm enjoying just the random exclamation points. Corey, Tears of Rage with Corey. He definitely not as articulate. Not as articulate. Thanks for the subscription there. Whoever that was RTDF516. Appreciate it. And Sophia. And James E. Gravy. Appreciate the subscriptions. Hi, Virginie. Glad to see you're in here. Men don't get the difference a lot of times between, being nice and... I've mixed it up. We're hopeful. We're optimistic creatures. What can we say? What can I say? Hopefully not too optimistic. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that the fire was soothing. That the suit was mysterious and authorial. I don't know what I'm trying to say. And I appreciate that you came and showed up and listened and had a grand old time. Been going for almost an hour and a half. I'm going to wrap it there. Thanks again to everybody who's bought a virtual coffee. I appreciate that. If you haven't yet and you're thinking about doing it, that would be great. I'm going to be literally just buying digital coffees from all these different coffee shops and just trying to pitch in some support somehow for some small businesses here in town. Because it's hard right now. It definitely sucks for a lot of them. And what's cool is some of them, I posted this on Instagram, but the Peloton is doing a one-time, if you're in Paris, they're doing a one-time coffee delivery tomorrow, so you can get in with them tonight or tomorrow. And you might have to do it tonight, but Paul's going to be riding a giant delivery bike around town, delivering coffee. So I think it's like $15 for 250 grams of Belleville's most recent roast. It got roasted today, which is going to be best in 18 days. So if you get it tomorrow, then you don't even have, you just put it away for 2.5 weeks, and then it'll be at its peak. It'll be at its prime and ready for drinking. KB Coffee is still doing orders online as well of their beans, which is great, and I need to do again here soon. And then Good News Coffee, they've opened their kitchen so they can do takeaway orders, and they're trying to get delivery up and running, so they're ready to roll as a delivery operation as well. So those are other ways, if you're in Paris, that you can support them. If you're in Paris and near Good News Coffee, for example, but then if you're not, buy a virtual coffee with me. It'd be great. I can't go see them. They're all too far away from me. But at least I can, try to pitch in a little bit. And then, of course, if you're able and you're up for it, I would really love it if you bought a copy of my book. If you're having a really hard time, finances are a struggle right now, the code that I put in that first video is still good. I think it's Make 2020 Better, but go to that video. It's in the description where I announced the launch of my book. Use that code. I think it's good for another week or two, and you'll get the ebook for free. It's just honor system. If you're having a hard time, if all this talk about virtual coffee and buying books is completely not your bag right now, I get it. I really get it. Obviously, if you didn't catch the first chapter of this book, I've been in similar spots, so I want to make sure that the cost of it's not an impediment to you getting to enjoy it. I would like you to enjoy it and hopefully find a little bit of encouragement in it, because I went through some pretty dark times, as you can tell in what you've heard already today, but I'm really fortunate to have come through a lot of it, not unscarred necessarily, but I don't know. I want to try and return the favor from the people that that, you know, were there for me down the line. So just trying to find some little ways that I can help, because I don't really know what I can do from quarantine in a lot of ways. But hopefully sitting by the fire, listening to it crackle. Thanks to the YouTube channel. It's like millions of views on this. What is this? 12 hours of relaxing fireplace sounds. It's a fantastic loop. If you want to subscribe to their channel as well, you know, go for that. I appreciate that they offered this delightful fiery background. And I hope you're staying safe and sound and solid and all the positive S words wherever you are. And yeah, I'll be making some more videos for next week here soon. Be sure to get those up. I'll get them up early for patrons. And thanks again to my patrons for voting on which chapters to read and the order in which I ended up reading them. I appreciate that. And thanks to everybody for grabbing a copy of the book and for hanging out. And I'm really, really glad that you guys were here. I'm sorry I'm breaking. Why am I breaking your heart? Because I'm not reading anymore? I don't understand. Yeah, definitely. Hopefully you enjoy the... Where do you get the book, Gina? Sorry, I missed that. There's a link in the description below. It's on my website, jayswanson.me/Sea of the Unknown. I can make that the screen. Let's get out of the fireplace here for a minute, and we'll just pull this guy over and let it load up. There you go. So jayswanson.me/Sea of the Unknown, which you might not be able to see under my face. Can you see that? No, you can't see the URL is the one thing you can't see. It's right there. See it? jayswanson.me/Sea of the Unknown. If you just go to jayswanson.me, it'll pop up right away. And yeah, grab the ebook, the paperback, or get them both. The paperback, we're only, if you want to get a paperback, you need to order it within the next basically 2 weeks, I think, before we run out. There's a timer down here, which we can fudge around with a little bit, but there's a, you know, we're going to be making one big order all at the same time, because the company that does the printing is also going to do the fulfilling. So we're going to just put in one big order with them, probably with a little bit of buffer, but not much, because I don't know what to do with extra books right now, because I was going to go get them myself. I don't know what's going on with shipping and all that stuff, and so maybe I'll ship the extras to my dad or something like that. But in the interim, we probably won't do another paperback for a while, and when we do, it'll be print on demand down the line. So if you want to grab one, now is really the only guaranteed time that we're going to be doing the paperback, and then we'll probably do it again in the future. So if you can't do it now and you really want one, don't freak out. We'll work to make that possible down the line. But this is where it's at, and you can see that Lindsay Tremuta and Oliver G both gave me some nice little glowing blurbs to encourage you to grab it. And yeah, hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully you enjoyed the reading tonight, and hopefully you know, you're doing okay wherever it is you are. And if you enjoyed this, maybe we'll do another one sometime in the future, or you can just watch it again because it'll be on YouTube still. And I'm gonna pull up you know, YouTube one more time so I can see what you guys are all saying, but I'm gonna bounce on out of here, I think. So thanks for watching and listening, everyone. I really appreciate it. I will say, I'll pass my hellos on to Paul and Richard and Gustav. Although if Richard's still in here, he can take it himself and give it to Gustav as well. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the book. I'm glad you're enjoying the ebook, Elizabeth. I can't wait to get the paper book either. I'm really excited to do that. And I'm glad you guys are enjoying it, for those of you that have already read it. Thanks for saying so. It's really nice of you. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope that you're having a grand old time. Stay safe out there. Stay cool in the increasingly warm weather. Unless you're in Australia or somewhere down under, then stay warm in the increasingly cool weather. And yeah, I'll see you here bright and early Monday morning, and again Tuesday, with more YouTube-y delightful nonsense from, you know, your pal in Paris, big oversized bearded Jay. I gotta trim this thing eventually. It's getting insane. The thing is nuts. Anyways, have a nice night, guys.